On this episode of Junkyard Gold, we're in Denton, Texas at CTC Auto Ranch. And it's true, everything is bigger in Texas. Let's get started. I'm Steve Mignonti, hot rod historian, author, and lover of all things cars. I travel all across the country to uncover the forgotten and hidden gems from the automotive world. Where others see piles of rusted scrap metal, I see the cars for what they really are, junkyard gold. Today on Junkyard Gold, we're in Denton, Texas at CTC Auto Ranch, getting rained on, but that's okay, I'm not gonna melt. Now in Texas, they like to do things big, and I understand there are a number of full-sized American muscle cars here, big block cars, as well as 50s and 60s relics, and we're gonna check them out. But before we do that, let's meet the guys who run this place.
Come on in out of the rain, Steve.
I'm here with Alan and David Williamson, the guys who run and own CTC Auto Ranch. What does CTC stand for?
It stands for Community Trading Center. Our father, he'd buy and sell furniture, motorcycles, cars. If you've got something, we'd trade for it.
Yeah. Okay, so the Auto Ranch, now you guys converted to all automotive stuff how long ago?
In about 1985.
Well, what do you guys specialize in and how far away do you ship to?
You know, we specialize in most cars 70s and older. We ship pretty much all over the world. Anywhere the freight company will go, we'll go. So far today, I've talked to someone in Turkey. I've talked to someone in Australia.
Turkey and Australia?
Yeah, and it was today, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. And what's the biggest seller for export?
A lot of parts, you know. The gentleman from Turkey was looking at cars, like a 59 Impala two-door hardtop.
A full car to sell?
Well, it's a parts car. It's a car that we've parted out. There's not much of it left.
Now, how many acres does CTC Auto Ranch occupy?
We've got about 35 acres.
The thing I like about your yard is it's well organized. It seems like it's pretty well laid out, so.
We've worked at that over the years and, you know, kind of got the way we need it.
All right, what's the lay of the land? Where do I start my hunt?
They're laid out in categories: Buicks, Cadillacs. The big cars are all down up in the front over there. Chryslers, old Chevrolets, old Fords are back in the back.
Lincoln.
More old Fords and Lincolns back that way.
Well, wish me luck.
I wish you luck.
Thank you. I'm going hunting.
All right, happy hunting.
We'll wait here.
Yeah, we'll wait here.
Oh, well, this is a 1950 Lincoln Cosmopolitan, and you wouldn't know it from today, but Texas can be a very hot state in the summertime. So you have to have air conditioning, and I'm seeing this right here. These are air scoops to feed an air conditioning system. Now, there's one problem. This 1950 Lincoln is 5 years too old to have factory air conditioning. It wouldn't arrive until 1955. So this is an aftermarket system, but it gives us a good look at how companies would add on air conditioning to keep cars cooler. Inside the trunk, oh yeah, here they are. These are the two electric fan motors that blow cool outside air in combination with chilled air from the condenser into the cabin to keep people cooler on those hot days. Let's take a look under the hood and see how much of that system's intact. Okay, not much. I see the condenser is still here, but again, that was not put there by Lincoln in 1950. That's an aftermarket piece. The compressor and all that kind of stuff has been stripped away. Now, this engine is Lincoln's 337 flathead V8. It may resemble the Ford 255, 239, but it has nothing in common. It's its own creature. But this is a great example of how the owners of this car kept it cool back in 1950 before Lincoln offered AC in 55. They can't all be Hemi-Cudas here on Junkyard Gold, and one car that I happen to like a lot is the Rambler Marlin. Now, you gotta remember that in the early 60s, fastback body styling was a big deal, and it led to a lot of sales. You don't think so? Well, how about Mustang 2+2s and Plymouth Barracudas, which sold by the tens of thousands? Well, American Motors in mid-65 decided they wanted a piece of that action. So what they did is they took their mid-sized Classic, which was actually a model, and added a fastback roof, and voila, they got the Marlin. Now, the downside was they didn't sell very well. These were available between 65, 66, and 67, and this is an example of a 65. Total production amounted to 10,327, and of them, about 80% were V8s, 20% were 6-cylinders. Let's see what we have here. Okay, all right, well, this is the American Motors V8. The base engine was the 232 overhead valve inline 6, but again, the vast majority were V8s. Now, there were two American Motors V8s, a 287 and a 327. It's hard to tell which one it is without the intake manifold. But what I can tell you for sure is that that 327 has nothing to do with the Chevrolet small block 327. It's a very different engine, completely different family. But this one here shows us American Motors overhead valve design. These engines were first seen in the mid-1950s, and AMC used them all the way through the 1966 model year. Not a bad engine, had some power. But again, the AMC V8, not a big powerhouse, but peppy enough to get this thing down the road. Let's take a look inside. The Marlin actually has room for a 6-footer to sitting all the way up. Now, that's a selling point that American Motors and Rambler did their best to exploit. Now, here's the thing, a Mustang 2+2 or a Plymouth Barracuda, I'd be sitting like this. Those fastbacks were pretty intrusive. Now, the problem is, it's a fact that Rambler stylists and interior engineers had battles over the roofline. In the end, the engineers won. Management said you have to be able to sit a 6-footer in the back of the Marlin or we're not going to do it. The reality is the roofline of these cars, as a result, is kind of tall and goofy. It would have been a lot sleeker, and I dare say probably would have sold better if they'd have squashed the roof down, but I couldn't sit like this, could I then? Another cool detail, again, all Marlins came with front disc brakes, no matter what engine they had, but they were by Bendix, and they were solid rotors. Unlike most GM and Ford and Chrysler brakes, which had an airspace between them, you'd think these would heat soak and warp, but they worked just fine. Rambler built Marlins for 3 years, 65, 66, and 67. Now, the 67 was a totally redesigned, larger car based on the Ambassador platform. That's not what we have here. But how do you tell a 65 from a 66? Because they're virtually identical. Well, the 65s have the word Rambler spelled out here in metal letters. The 66s do not. Now you know. Gotta say, this has got to be the world's smallest trunk lid. Now, if this were mine, gotta say, this thing is so far gone that there's only one thing I would do with it. I would build an altered wheelbase funny car. Now, back in the 60s, there was a car sponsored by Bill Kraft Rambler of Los Angeles and driven by a guy named Preston Hanea. What they did is they took a black Marlin, moved the rear axle forward about a foot, put a straight axle up front, and injected Hemi, an art car push-button torque flight, and hit the match racing circuit. That's exactly what I'd do with this Marlin right here. It'd be a perfect result. All right, let's keep looking. There's a lot more here. This is a 1962 Pontiac Tempest with the drivetrain on display. Now, in 1961, Tempest was new, and MotorTrend magazine made it their car of the year. Now, this was part of the Buick Olds Pontiac Senior Compact line for 1961, meant to take on Falcon, Studebaker, Valiant, all those compact cars. But what made the Tempest unique, unlike any other, was its independent rear suspension and rear transaxle. What we have here are the half shafts. Here's the upper frame, the lower control arms, and this is the Power Glide automatic transmission right here with the torque converter that spins away at the back, and that was part of the deal. Now, there were also 3- and 4-speed manual transmissions available, but they were right back here. Now, getting the power to this was this thing here. This is the housing for what was called the rope drive. Pontiac actually engineered a torque rod that brought power from the front, where the engine was, to the back of this car inside of this. It was notoriously called the rope drive Tempest. But again, these cars were very significant from an engineering standpoint, but the public didn't quite get it. These only were sold in 61, 2, and 3, and in 64, Pontiac made the Tempest a much more conventional car, which gave us the GTO. Oh, man. A Chevy Monza Mirage. This takes me back to 1977. I was 13 years old, and these things came out. The thing about the Monza Mirage is that these were all powered by the 305 V8. Now, it wasn't a machine, with a lot of power, but 145 horsepower was a pretty big deal. Now keep in mind that the Monza essentially was a Vega, a little bigger, but it's something that John DeLorean, the GM executive, called the Italian Vega. These were styled and patterned after the Ferrari 365 GT4, so they were kind of an exotic looking car. And again, you know, they never put V8s in Vegas from the factory, but companies like Don Hardy would sell you a kit. Well, this is essentially a V8 Vega, but beyond that, the Mirage is a limited edition IMSA lookalike. It's a wide body kit. Now, these were built at Chevrolet's Canadian plant and then shipped to a company called Michigan Auto Techniques, where they were then converted into the Mirage. They added fiberglass fender extensions on the front and the rear, a tail spoiler, and a graphics package. But the thing to keep in mind is that the Mirage was a very limited production car. There were 4,097 of these cars built, and these were actually a really big deal when they were new. Let's take a closer look at the engine bay. Okay, yeah, there it is. That's the 305 two-barrel. Now, this is before the day of electronic feedback carburetors, but it's got HEI, which was standard on all Chevy small blocks from about 74 on up, 75-ish. But one detail about all Monzas is the fact that the engine bay is very wide, incredibly wide. You might wonder why. Well, in 1970, General Motors paid a $50 million licensing fee to a German company called NSU for the right to the Wankel. At the time, early 70s, the world thought the Wankel was going to be the big engine of the future, and they actually planned to launch the Monza with the Wankel. Therefore, this huge wide engine bay. Keep in mind that Wankels are generally triangular, wider at the bottom than the top. That's why it's such a huge engine bay. Now, the problem was the EPA and General Motors never got the Wankel to pass emissions and fuel economy standards, so it never happened. So $50 million was blown to the wind to make room for the Wankel, but again, it never happened. Now, the good news under the hood here is that this 305 is a workable engine. It's not a lot of power, but you can do the usual hop-ups, headers, carburetor, intake. Now, the big question is, what transmission's behind this? There could be a stick shift or an automatic. Let's go inside and find out. Please be a 4-speed. Oh, okay, automatic. Well, at least it's the 3-speed turbo 350 automatic transmission. It's okay. I mean, it'll handle the V8 power, no problem there, but you could get a stick shift with one of these things. That's what I prefer. Now, keep in mind, this does have the performance gauge package with a voltmeter, temperature gauge, no idiot lights here, has a tachometer, but it does also have an 80-mile-an-hour speedometer. Now, this is a 1977 model. The Fed didn't mandate the 85-mile-per-hour speedometer until 1980, so GM kind of beat them to the punch by a few years. Now, the thing I like about the Monza is that it checks two of the boxes of high performance. V8 engine, small car, has the image, but again, is it really a muscle car or not? I think we know the answer. With a price of nearly $5,000, the Monza Mirage was a pretty expensive car, especially for a Monza, which is an entry-level car. As a result, Chevrolet dealers actually sold a conversion kit with these fiberglass panels so dealers could convert their cars. Now, how do we know this is one of the real ones, one of 4,097 built? We go to the door. Here, we can see the remains of the certification sticker from Michigan Auto Techniques. It shows here that the car has been certified for safety standards and that it's ready for use in all 50 states. Without that sticker, chances are you're looking at a dealer-level clone. The Mirage, like classics like the Charger Daytona, even the 77 Pontiac Can-Am, anytime a car goes from the manufacturer to a completion facility for final assembly, that adds value. The Mirage fits that category, so I dare say this is a future collectible. If a disco-era Trans Am is worth money, these should be too. They're V8 compact cars. How does it get cooler than that? All right, let's keep looking. The guys in the yard were kind enough to lift this 1960 Pontiac Ventura up here so I can show you something kind of cool. This is the legendary Pontiac 8-lug wheel. Why do they call it 8 lugs? There's only 5 here, right? No, the outer 8 lugs are the ones you use. Check this out. These are designed so that the rear and front brake drums are also, well, an art piece meant to be seen. The rims themselves have the 8 tabs and more of a perimeter hoop. These wheels are used between 1960 and 68 only on full-size Pontiacs. The funny thing is, the GTO, the car that really could have used these, was never fitted with the 8-lug wheel as an option, although in 1966, Pontiac ran an ad. That said, Walk Softly Carry a GTO. In that, they showed a burgundy GTO with these things airbrushed, but they never made production. But with that said, there are several varieties of the 8-lug wheel. Some have short fins, some have long fins, some are natural, some are black, different caps. A whole minefield. In fact, in 1962, when Pontiac went from ball bearings to tapered bearings up front, it took a whole different drum. So these all look about the same, but they're not. Now here in the yard, there are many full-size Pontiacs. This is the only one I've seen with the 8-lug wheels. They're very rare. Buick Wildcat, 64, 4-door, hood pins. Who puts hood pins on a car that doesn't have something special under the hood? We gotta look closer. Okay, there it is. I can see why they have locking hood pins on this. That is one heck of an engine. The dual quad 425 nailhead. Now this car would have had stock of 401, although the 425 with a single 4-barrel was optional. But if you went all the way with RPO W5, you got this. The 425 cubic inch nailhead V8, 360 horsepower. Now I do see something here. These carburetors are incorrect. This would have a pair of Karcher AFBs instead of these 4-jet Rochesters. So somebody monkeyed around with this thing, but this is absolutely the correct manifold. And in fact, these finned aluminum valve covers are also part of that W5 dual quad engine. This is a pretty rare piece. Think about it. This is a 4-door Wildcat, grandma's car, grandpa's car, but it's got Buick's hottest engine, a dual quad 425 with 360 horsepower. Very, very cool. It's a sleeper if ever there was one. Like all full-size Buicks from 1958 through 69, this will have the big aluminum drum brakes up front. Now these are 12-inch diameter with a sintered iron lining friction surface inside. Now the fins that we see on this are heat sinks. They take the heat, draw it out from the drum into the airstream and cool off the brakes. The funny thing is, Buick never used these big brakes on their muscle cars. Let's take a look at the front fender. Okay, over here we see something specific to the 1964 Wildcat, and that's the lack of the venter ports, which were used on Buicks all through the 50s and were really a trademark. Instead, for 1964 Wildcat only, Buick substituted the venter ports with 3 horizontal trim pieces like that. It may not look like much here, but it was a radical departure to have a Buick without venter ports. Now, another thing, too, is that the Wildcat name was first seen in 1953 as a fiberglass 2-seater, kind of Buick's show car to answer the Corvette. Well, it never came to happen, but it's a great name, so Buick came back to it in 1962 as a personal luxury car. It was a 2-door hardtop, kind of cool. But in '63, Buick watered it down and the Wildcat became a model unto itself with 4 doors and convertibles. So it was no longer an exclusive mark, but it was still a cool car. I mean, Wildcat, what a cool name for a car. Now inside this car, there's a chance we could see a 4-speed transmission. It was optional, 177 bucks. But more likely, we're gonna see an automatic. Let's take a look. Well, that's too bad. You could have had a 4-speed, but this one has the automatic, which for 1964 was finally GM's Turbo 400, a modern automatic with an aluminum case, 3 forward speeds, and finally Buick broke away from its line of exotic switch pitch transmissions, Dynaflows, and all those crazy things from the 1950s, and they standardized with the Turbo 400 for '64. So we don't have a 4-speed, and believe it or not, there was a 3-speed manual on the column that was also available for those frugal buyers. An interesting story is that the U.S. Rubber Company, which made tires in Laredo, Texas, probably about 5 hours from right here, back in the 60s, they had a high-speed tire test track. Well, they bought a brand new Wildcat dual quad 425 car, and they ran it around their track testing tires. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. Now, you gotta remember that the engine is the heart and soul of any car, and because somebody had the smarts to pay $144 extra for the W5 dual quad 425, that elevates this Wildcat into something very special. Now, if this were my car, I dare say it deserves a full restoration, right back to factory stock. Now, the downside is it takes a very special person to understand how cool this car is, and at a good shop, you'd probably spend $80,000 to $90,000 getting this car restored. But I say it's worth it. It's a labor of love, and why not? When the Corvair arrived in 1960, it was a revolution. In fact, it was the MotorTrend Car of the Year. But a lot of people couldn't get past the idea that it didn't have a proper grille because the Corvair was rear-engined and air-cooled. So Chevrolet stylists gave vestigial chrome little add-ons right there that some people accepted. But a lot of folks see the grille of a car as its face. And a lot of folks thought the Corvair didn't have a face. So as a result, companies like J.C. Whitney sold aftermarket add-on grille kits that were purely ornamental, and they gave the Corvair a face. This one's in great condition, and today, a Corvair restorer looking for cherry on top, something that nobody else has at the show, would probably pay a few $100 for that thing right there. Now we know. Mid-50s Ford wagons, Plymouth B-bodies from the 70s, smog dogs, except for this, 15x7 cop wheels. This could be something special. Now, if it is what I think it is, it's an A38 Police Fury. These were very popular with the police. Now, this one of three engines going to happen here. It's the 360 small block, the 400 big block, and the 440 big block. And it all starts with adding up the clues. Let's start with the exhaust system. Oh yeah, dual exhaust. Now that starts to narrow this down. This is certainly a police interceptor. One cool thing is that Chrysler utilized the resonators here to tone down the exhaust note a little bit. Those same canister resonators were used on street Hemis in the 1960s. So it's kind of cool they reprised them for the late 70s police interceptor cars. Okay, we got to start adding more clues. Let's get to the engine compartment and see what we got. The baby food paint on this thing's not fooling me. A lot of the times, police departments respray cars before they sell them. Sure enough, this black paint right here is the ghost of the black and white squad car paint this car was born with. A lot of time, police agencies will respray a car in non-police colors so nobody confuses the buyer with an actual officer. Okay, the dual exhaust on this car rules out the 360 small block. So we're looking at either a 400 or a 440 big block under this hood. Drum roll, please. Oh yeah, the 440. This is the same basic engine that powered Charger RTs, Superbird, Super Bs, all those great muscle cars in the 1960s. And keep in mind, this Fury is a B body, not a full-size C body. So you think about that. This is a 440 four-door B body, 1978, the last of the muscle cars. Take a peek under the dual snorkel air cleaner. There it is. There's that Carter Thermoquad 4-barrel carburetor. I see the high upswept exhaust manifolds, the COP alternator to run the battery and all the radio equipment in these things, cooler for the steering, and even this is very cool. This is a 7-blade aluminum clutch fan. Same stuff used on Super Track Pack 440s and street Hemis. And again, Chrysler dipped into the parts bin to make these cars as potent as they could be. This is a really, really cool piece. I'm amazed to see it in the boneyard. Further, we can go to the trim tag and learn more. We see the code E86 tells us it's a 440 car. We know that because it's still here. But if you ever wonder if you found a real police car, well, you go to the trim tag, Y39 and A38. Those two codes will tell you found yourself an actual police interceptor. Amazing piece. Let's take a look inside. Okay, yeah, I mean, don't go looking for a 4-speed or a pistol grip. After all, this was 1978. That stuff was long gone, and you couldn't get a manual transmission behind the 440 or the 400 for that matter. So they all had column-mounted heavy-duty torque flight 727. Great transmission. I do still see the presence of the certified 140-mile-an-hour speedometer, the factory gauges for temperature, oil pressure, alternator, all that stuff's still here. And keep in mind, 1974 saw the advent of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit on national highways. It was a really ugly time. But again, the energy crisis was in full swing. But to catch people who flaunted that law, these cars were capable of going 133 miles per hour. In fact, the 77 and 78 440 Furies were the final police cars capable of breaking 130 until 1994. When the Caprice LT1 arrived on the scene and finally brought speed and muscle back into the police car scene. But again, this is a very, very cool car. I even see here remnants of the A-pillar mounted spotlight that some officer Probably sat right here and used while writing tickets to those speeders out on the Texas interstates. What a cool car. What a shame to see in the junkyard. If this were mine, I'd keep it. After all, it's got cop brakes, cop wheels, cop steering, cop engine. It's all there. I think I'd try to find a police officers association, have them do the restoration, use it as a parade vehicle. It deserves to live on. It's a cool piece. Final year for the 440, final year for the big block B body. It's historic as heck. It's got to live on. Well, that's our show from rainy Denton, Texas, where we're here at CTC Auto Ranch. We saw some cool stuff. American Motors' first post-war fastback, the 65 Marlin, and some full-size muscle cars with more bite than bark in the form of that dual-quad Buick Wildcat and 78 Police Fury. And yeah, we also saw a muscle car with more bark than bite in that 77 Monza Mirage, which really was kind of a Mirage, not a lot of substance, but still a cool car. Well, if you like what you've seen here on Junkyard Gold, let us know. And if there's a yard you want us to come and visit, let us know that too. Till next time, I'm Steve Yankee. Stay dry. We saw that 77 Monza Mirage, a muscle car with potentially more bite than bark. Okay.